evening, Eugene. How are you?
I'm good, Jana. How are you?
Great, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to our What's Not in the Mainstream News Week 27. We have a really good discussion tonight, and we have some of the stuff will definitely be a red pill for some people, but you don't have to trust Eugene or I. You can do your own research. We'll put all the links in the description field. For those who haven't watched our podcast before, I'm Jana London, founder of the Natural Women's Council, and Eugene Garvin is a retired director in the engineering field and does a lot of our research for the Natural Women's Council and Irish Education Alliance, Parents' Rights Alliance, and Lawyers for Justice Ireland. So I will just take a moment to cover some of the previous weeks for anyone who didn't get to tune in to the What's Not in the Mainstream News weekly roundup. We have week 27 tonight. We started 3 weeks ago, and with week 24, and these are all on the playlist on the Natural Women's Council YouTube. For week 24, we had the ILGA pledge to see what some of our public reps have signed up for. We talked about surrogacy, the CAS report, WPATH files for the week 24. Week 25, we talked about the EU migration, the WEF reinventing food, busybodies, and Bishop Schneider. And then last week, week 26, we talked about stakeholder capitalism, which got a lot of great feedback. That went a bit viral on Twitter. Dr. Owen Lenihan commented it was one of the best explanations of stakeholder capitalism that he had seen. So we welcomed that feedback. Tonight we have quite a bit to cover. Eugene, I'll turn it over to you. You can start on the red pill news this week.
Yep. So I think the first thing we'll cover is something that actually has been covered in the main news to a degree. Again, it's Enoch Burke is out. He was released, and I think we will actually stick in a talk that he did that's on Twitter, on X, so that people mightn't have seen. So we'll have that link in the description. It's great to see him out, and it's also interesting to listen to him. So we won't steal from his thunder. You can listen to that yourself offline, and it's good to see Enoch out and free. And I guess the next thing I'm going to kind of bring up is the context of him being in there for so long and other people that have been committing crimes and not being put in prison. So there's a video from a guy called Derek Domino. He's quite popular on YouTube. Some people may be aware of him already. That's an Irish YouTube channel, and he talks about the pure hypocrisy, and he's talking about the case. I guess that people would be familiar with the Natasha O'Brien case, and Cathal Crotty, the army man, and the fact that he got off. And I mean, I think we were all appalled by this. It was just it was crazy, and she was very badly attacked by him, and it was quite a violent attack and all that. So no qualms about that. I guess what Derek in his video was calling out is the fact that there was lots of other attacks on women, and because and where the perpetrator was actually got a suspended sentence, again similar to Mr. Crotty. And his issue was that there wasn't such a fuss made about those because there were non-nationals that were involved. And he goes through a number of examples, which is true, I guess. There was no marches in the street for those, and they all got off as well. And they were at varying levels. I'm not sure if they're quite the same level of ferociousness as this particular attack, but they all warranted probably a sentence. And I guess when you put that in the context of Enoch being in prison, occupying a cell, and these people going free, having attacked people, well, there's an issue there with regard to justice, I would say. I think there's a grave injustice.
If you look at the contrast, Enoch Burke stood against transgenderism, which is an attack on women and it's an attack on children. And someone was locked away for 400 days for really defending women and children. And then you see, a lot of these non-nationals who've attacked people and gotten completely off with no sentence. So it's just, it's absolutely shocking.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. So there's a kind of a double injustice there. And, I suppose Derek Domino's video doesn't cover Enoch, but we're making the point regarding Enoch. And I think it's a valid one as well as the points he makes in his video. So we kind of alluded to this before, the WEF Young Leaders program. So it's a program that's been run for quite a while. And there we've got Leo Varadkar in the middle of it. And you'll see Justin Trudeau, one of the star performers. You know, and there's an interview that you'll hear with Klaus Schwab. I think it's coming back from 2017, and he's talking about the fact that he had penetrated the cabinet in Canada. About 50% of that cabinet were involved in the WEF Young Leaders program. And we can see the mess that Canada is at the moment. And they're going to be voted out. I mean, Trudeau and his crew are going to be voted out at the next election. They're way behind in the polls because they're so unpopular. They've been pushing this agenda aggressively into the Canadian people. So thankfully, the Canadian people can look to, there is a future. There's an end to the tyranny that's going on in Canada. And unfortunately, we don't quite have that here. We can see Jacinda Ardern in there. The same thing was happening in New Zealand. She was running the tyranny of the WEF in during the COVID period, as we know. And thankfully, she's gone now and her government's been displaced. They got rid of all the crazy sex education and gender ideology in schools. They've turned it around. So
well, I hope they save Canada. I lived there on a work assignment and it was one of the best times of my life. And the Canadians are wonderful people. So I surely hope that country gets rid of that tyranny and gets back to normal.
No, and I mean, I guess one of the things they said about the Canadian people is that they're so accommodating, so friendly, that they were ripe for this to come in there. If they were aggressive, if there were people who push back and, you know, would be out protesting on the streets all the time, then they may not have got affected by it as much. But because they're such nice people, they're so accommodating, they want to accommodate everybody, and then they were taken advantage of.
Like the Irish.
Just like I was going to say it,
like
Jana,
the
that's
Irish,
the exact
friendly,
same thing is happening here. Yeah. We are extremely welcoming. And the notion that there's systemic racism in Ireland is just so abhorrent. It is so abhorrent. And it's just been driven by an agenda, and we'll get into it. James Lindsay, we referenced him earlier on, he talks about the corruption of stakeholder capitalism. What does he mean by the corruption of stakeholder capitalism? Well, let's look at it. There was a paper produced by the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance, talks about the stakeholder model and ESG. Okay, so Klaus Schwab is a graduate of the Harvard Law School, and he worked with Henry Kissinger. And we do believe that probably Henry Kissinger had a huge influence on Klaus Schwab in terms of what he's doing right now. But look at number 3 here. This talks about incentivization for executives to push ESG into their corporations and their organizations. So basically, executives are going to reward themselves for pushing a woke agenda within their companies. So why aren't they going? It just follows, right? They're going to push it, and they might push that. They might give incentives to their middle managers, etc., as well to push this agenda. So is there any surprise we're seeing this thing becoming so pervasive? So there's this whole paper. James Lindsay covers it in his video. He talks through the paper. We'll have a link to the paper. We'll have a link to the video. You can look at yourself offline. This is the corruption he's referring to. So senior executives are driven by their pay and their incentives. So if you're going to pay them extra money to do something, they're going to push hard to get that extra bonus. And right now, that's what they're doing. They're pushing this agenda to get the bonuses, basically that they've agreed to pay to themselves. So everybody's been taken in. This is a scam. The Corporate Equality Index is a scam. ESG is a scam, and you can see it here. And all it's doing is making the richer people richer.
There is cabinet members that we don't always see, senior civil servants who were actually sent over to Harvard Law School to go through this indoctrination and bribed with an Ivy League education. So watch future episodes and we'll do a deeper dive into some of our Irish cabinet members.
Yeah, we need, absolutely, Jana. We need to cover some of those people. So the next one is a 1.5-hour documentary. This is we referred to this kind of last week when we did the Richard Jeffs YouTube video, and he produced a full documentary on this called Stakeholder Communism. An hour and a half. You definitely have to watch this. So we've got, again, that link will be in the description. So the next thing I want to talk about is activist scholarship, is the term I'm using. You could call it social justice scholarship. You could call it grievance studies. They're terms that other people have used. And I'm going to use the thing here of marrying a truth with a lie. And we'll kind of see it as we get into it. And this is the scholarship that we have today in our universities under the banner of critical social justice. So we need to do a quick refresh first on where does critical social justice comes from. So On the one hand, it comes from critical theory from the Frankfurt School. It's basically a theory which looks to critique a society. So it comes up with things like the society is intrinsically racist. We all know about that, right? We hear that. It sees that the society, is misogynistic, etc. The society doesn't support trans people or LGBTQ people, that oppresses them, and it just instills a mindset of oppression and privilege, and it tries to basically divide people in a society. This was conjured up by these Marxists from the 1920s to basically destroy Western society. And it's been married in recent times with postmodernism. So postmodernism is another school of thought, and this is where the whole notion of gender as a social construct comes from, and basically denying meta narratives like science and biology and religion. This all comes from it, and it comes from these people you'll see on the right hand side here: Michel Foucault. We've talked about him in another video, etc. Jacques Derrida, etc. So we're not going to go into postmodernism in detail, but the toxic mix of the two of these is critical social justice. And some of the protagonists are there: Judith Butler and the whole gender thing, Derek Bell and Richard Delgado, people on the critical race theory side, Kimberly Crenshaw on intersectionality, which is kind of, I'm both LGBTQ and I'm also black and I'm also disabled. So you've got multiple levels of victimhood. And this is all about instilling a mindset of victimhood into people. This is toxic. This is absolutely toxic stuff. And unfortunately, this stuff has taken off in the last 10 years. And I've been scratching my head as trying to figure out, why has it taken off? But I think we've seen why it's taken off, because it's been pushed. It's been pushed to basically destabilize our youth and our young people, indoctrinating them. So let's look at a few examples. Let's look at critical race theory. And again, I say marrying a truth with a lie. So the truth is that there is a level of racism still in society. It's pretty low. In Ireland, it's pretty low. It's probably more in the US. And racism in Africa and in Asia would be very bad. Like, we don't know anything about racism. If you really want to see racism, go to Africa or go to Asia, go to China. Because I'll tell you, the racism there is on a level like you wouldn't believe. But look at the lie. This is the lie of critical race theory. And this is what they teach in Western schools. They don't teach this in Chinese schools or African schools. They teach it in Western schools. The racism is systemic in society, that all people have privilege, and they use it to oppress people of color, and they engage in microaggressions. And if you disagree with that, you're suffering from white fragility or white comfort. This is the lie. And they want to teach this in our schools.
And
this
Eugene,
is something they want to ram down the throats of our children.
What we might do is put in the description field the document that we came across today, the one called the National Action Plan Against Racism from the Government of Ireland. And it has a foreword written by no one other than young global leader Leo Varadkar and Minister for Children and Integration Roderick O'Gorman. So we'll pop that PDF link in there. It's a 60-page document, but I think I have a little bit of optimism here that, maybe with what's happened over the last several years in Ireland, people haven't risen up and gotten angry. But I think the critical race theory and the white privilege might be what really angers people, because of all people in the entire world, the Irish who were oppressed for 800 years, colonized, they should not feel guilty or privileged or anything for being who they are.
I've worked over 30 years in a multinational, and I would have worked with people from 4 different continents throughout that 30 years. We never had an issue with Irish people and racism. No. We did have issues in other geographies with people who would have been racist, but not Irish people. The one thing that we had was that Irish people were good at working with everybody. Everyone got on with us. We got on with everybody. That's a virtue. That's what Irish people have been good at. And that's over 30 years ago. That hasn't changed. We haven't got worse in the last 30 years. No. But with this nonsense, it will make us worse. Yeah. That's the problem with this thing, this critical race theory. It
putting it
brings
in the likes of school, teaching young children that they should feel privileged for being, it was, I think, in the document about allyship was if you're white, male, or Irish. So you're privileged if you're white, male, or Irish. I mean, that is breeding racism in school. It's creating kids to notice skin colors and notice things that are different. Whereas kids don't notice that. Kids love everyone. They're born full, and the Irish are so friendly. So it's it's creating that division and that
Oh yeah,
divide,
yeah,
and that when
yeah.
there isn't
She,
any.
she's combining everything. She's combined. If you
Yes,
make it male, then that's feminist theory, and if you bring in the
yes,
fact that you're Irish, you're bringing in colonial theory.
yes.
And why you're referring Ireland, because we were never a colonial power.
No.
To bring us in the context of that is just such nonsense. Now, this is garbage anyway. So critical race
Hmm.
theory is garbage. So,
It's even more
and of course,
garbage
the
in
reason,
Ireland.
yeah, the reason they want to push this, and the reason that Klaus Schwab wants to push this, and the WEF people, is because they want to get an uprising of people talking that we need social and political transformation. Transformation means a move to communism. That's what transformation, when they use that term
Hmm.
transformation, that's what they mean. So they want to create an uprising of people to say, we absolutely need hate speech laws. That's the reason we need them. We need to bring them in.
Hmm.
They want people to be accepting of adopting these authoritarian laws in the country
Hmm.
and accepting them and actually asking for them.
Yeah.
So they want to push and indoctrinate the kids and the students
Hmm.
on that basis to create a more inclusive and equitable society. That's the term.
Yeah.
So we'll go for another feminist queer theory and queer theory. Again, that marrying a truth with a lie. The truth is that trans people exist. Yes, they do. They were a tiny minority, predominantly male. They were split between people with the body dysmorphia called gender dysphoria, and also those with the paraphilia called autogynephilia. So this is again, it's marrying a truth with a lie. There are people who exist who have this, these issues, and the very small number of them. And now we've got a whole load of people who have got, gender confusion because we've been teaching it to kids in school, and we've particularly been teaching it to vulnerable kids, like autistic kids and gay kids.
Hmm.
So again, the bottom line is we need social and political transformation. That's what they're pushing for. And the next one is climate. There is this climate alarmism right now that we're got an existential threat to the planet, that the earth is burning, and we have to pursue net zero. And this is a huge WEF thing. This is a huge thing that the World Economic Forum and United Nations are pushing. And again, it's to push people to get draconian legislation introduced, that we have to get rid of our herd of cattle in Ireland because they're producing all the methane gas that's destroying the climate. But you know what they're not talking about? They're not talking about the coal burning stations in China and getting rid of those. Do you notice that?
They want to cull 200,000 Irish cattle and have us eating
Yeah,
laboratory meat and crickets. But you're right, coal in China. Isn't that a little dirtier than an Irish
yeah,
cow? That doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
They're still building coal stations in our power stations in China.
Mm.
They haven't stopped. And as we'll see, if you look at some of those videos, Klaus Schwab is buddy buddy with the Chinese. Again, it's all about creating the social and political transformation to create a more sustainable society. And you've seen that language all through those WEF websites that we looked at, all through the other groups that are there as well. They're all on the same themes. Again, just to give an example, there was I suppose it was a kind of a sting operation that was done a couple of years ago, and we've got the link to the YouTube videos here. It was called the Grievance Studies Affair, and a group of intellectuals got together and they started producing a number of feminist papers, basically. We've got an example of one of them here. It's the conceptual penis as a social construct. Um, so you can probably you can make from that what you will. We've got a copy of the paper. This was just a rubbish paper, right? But it was written in the language of feminist theory, of gender theory. It aligned with all of the kind of things that they would want. You'll even see a reference to climate change. So what climate change has to do with the conceptual penis as a social construct, I have no idea. But the fact that you pull that in, it just makes this sufficiently woke that this paper would get published. And if you look through some of those videos, they got 7 papers published that were all based on just crazy ideas, basically. One of them, they took a chapter out of Mein Kampf, translated it, and they rewrote it in feminist language, and it got published. I think they got commended for that one as well. So this is woke scholarship. It's nonsense scholarship. It's rubbish. And it's in academia, and they're trying to push this into our schools now and indoctrinate our kids with this stuff. And it's all been supported by our government. It's been supported by the United Nations, by the European Union. Parents in Ireland have control over, well, you should have control over, is what's taught in our schools. We need to stop this stuff in our schools. It's nonsense. So I have a summary here of the reason for pushing all of this stuff. And they basically want to destabilize kids, destabilize young people, indoctrinate them in this stuff so that they'll be pushing to get hate speech laws, restrictions on travel, restrictions on food, that they will accept crazy authoritarian legislation because it was all for the good of saving the planet and saving the people and creating a more inclusive and equitable society. And the theme of being a global citizen, being an activist, you'll see them. They're in the primary curriculum as key learning outcomes. And all these theories are part of the primary school curriculum. Now, we produced a video on that. People said that we were too negative in that video. We were spot on in that video. We called it out for what it is. People just need to wake up and see this stuff. This stuff is nonsense. This whole thing about critical race theory, it's outrageous. And we're giving you some references and links in this video that you can check up, and you'll find out a bit more about it and why it's so crazy. So very important learning experience here. We've also got a link to a Climate the Movie, which talks about the whole issue of climate alarmism and the reality versus, what the agenda that's been pushed. So lots of links there, lots of stuff for people to consume, but I think you can see what's going on here. And this is a top-down thing that's been pushed from the very top, endorsed by all these corporations, locked into the system with ESG scores, and this kind of the funding channels that are there. And this is influencing our government and our public representatives, and we can see that. And unfortunately, it's influencing a lot of people in our society who have been fooled. And of course, you're not going to hear anything against this if you read the Irish Times or if you look at RTE or News Talk, because they're going to be fully in line with all this.
A parent contacted us and their child came home absolutely distraught from school in tears, saying, I don't think I'm going to be able to have children. The world won't be here. And this child was like 9 or 10 years old, came home from school, traumatized that the teacher put this climate alarmism into the child's brain. And Senator Ronan Mullen spoke about this recently in the Seanad as well, about the climate alarmism and the effect it's having on students.
Oh, yeah. But, they'll be surveying those kids, you see. In a few years' time, they'll be surveying them when they're a bit older. And you'll get these surveys saying that, 90% of Irish children are afraid of climate and they want action on climate and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is the sort of thing you're going to see, right? The videos have just popped out regarding the Irish or the Ireland Free Speech Summit that was on just a week ago, and there's some really good videos in there. We have a link to one of them here, but when you get into that, you can go to the ADF website, and that'll show you the other ones. This is actually a video by a professor, Professor Fiamengo from the University of Ottawa in Canada, and she talks about how to write a gender theory paper, and she uses that example of the paper we used earlier, of the conceptual penis as a social construct. And she's got a whole load of videos on YouTube. We'll probably reference them again, talking about feminist theory and how crazy it is, talking about your gender as a social construct and all of that. So this lady, she was an activist in her time. She admits that she was, and she basically woke up to reality, and she's totally against all of this stuff now. And she's a firm advocate for being grounded in reality and not in some of this crazy stuff that we're seeing coming from academia. So well worthwhile checking this video out, and she's got a lot of other good videos as well. The next one is another video on the whole area of stakeholder capitalism from Richard Jeffs. It came out on the 17th of June. He covers more ground in this particular one, so I actually found this one, if you want to get a broader perspective on it, this is actually quite a good video. Richard Jeffs has put himself on the line. He refused to adopt ESG in his business, and it's effectively put him on the breadline because he's been frozen out now because of that. But he's continued making these videos. He obviously has the expertise and the equipment to do that. And he has produced a full documentary, as we mentioned earlier on. So definitely check this video out because it gives you a very good overview. Helen Pluckrose, she was one of the people who was involved in creating those fake papers. And this is a very good talk on the topic of postmodern theory and those critical social justice theories that we mentioned earlier on. And she covers those in this talk. And she kind of talks about how crazy this has got and how that there's zero tolerance for any debate. These theories have to be accepted. If you don't accept them, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, etc., etc. Now that we see that they're being pushed from the top, there is no tolerance. There is an agenda. That's what's happening here. Is an agenda. This thing isn't something that you can debate and have a discussion about. It's been pushed down on top of you in an authoritarian manner. So the websites of the week this week. So the first one is a reference website that you can take a look at. It's the IPAS statistics. So this covers all of the incoming migration into Ireland, where it's coming from, compares it to similar periods last year. I've got a month view here for May, and you can see that we've doubled the amount of incoming in 2024 versus 2023.
We have our fourth public meeting about Thornton Hall, and we're getting absolutely no answers from the Department of Integration, the community engagement team, absolutely treated like mushrooms. It's an information vacuum. So it's our fourth meeting, and some of the local councillors who have been writing in are getting no answers back. But looking at that chart, these clearly looking at the countries they're coming from, they're economic migrants. They are not fleeing war or persecution.
The next website is Marxist.org, kind of a strange website to put up. It's if you're into Marxism and you want to get reference material and the writings of Karl Marx and Engels and all the Frankfurt School people like Herbert Marcuse, etc., you'll get it here. You won't have to pay money for it. You don't have to buy the books. You'll probably get a lot of them here. So it's good from that perspective. Not that you might want to be reading a lot of that stuff, but it is useful for things like the Frankfurt School. They do cover the Frankfurt School. So if you've never heard about the Frankfurt School, you can read a bit about them here and what they were all about and who they were. And you can also read about communism and the family. And I put this article in here deliberately because it does give you the kind of perspective, which is kind of probably a postmodern perspective. It certainly would be a Klaus Schwab type perspective of the family. And it's a very different view of the family than we would have. And it's all about getting the mother back out into the labor force, the children being raised by the state, and effectively, you don't really have a family. You have children, but they're being raised by the state. They're being indoctrinated by the state, and basically the mother and father are out working as workers in the state system. So have a read about it. Kind of shows you how their view on family. It's one view. There's other views. There's other communist views on family, which are even worse. So the book of the week is Cynical Theories, and it's again in keeping with these crazy radical theories. Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay are the two main authors of it, and it's about how activist scholarship made everything about race, gender, and identity. And this is the agenda being pushed by the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, to radicalize our kids and get our kids to accept a communist regime and communist authoritarian laws in our society. And God knows we can see it. It's happening in Ireland already. And we can see what's happening in the curriculum. It's already in the junior cycle. The CSP curriculum in the junior cycle is all about rights, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ advocacy, all that stuff. And they're doing the same to the primary curriculum, and also obviously the whole notion of climate catastrophe, etc.
If you want to do a deeper dive into the corruption of Irish education on the Natural Women's Council YouTube, there's a playlist, The Corruption of Irish Education. I think it's 6 or 7 parts now, and it does talk in part 1 about the Frankfurt School. It drills down from United Nations Frankfurt School, drills right down to how this is actually making its way or has made its way into the Irish classroom. So that's a really, really shocking, viewer discretion required series. Some parts are very disturbing, but it does show everybody where this is coming from in our schools.
Yeah, so absolutely. So this is kind of, I suppose, bringing it up a level. This is what's coming from academia, and as we've seen earlier in this presentation, it's been pushed by the World Economic Forum. The scholarship associated with this, things like gender studies, feminist studies, and that's been sponsored by members of the World Economic Forum. Various philanthropists and foundations are paying for that. They're paying for the startup of departments covering these themes in universities all over the world. And obviously it's been supported by the governments as well that are bought into this whole agenda.
Thanks to everyone who has watched this, and that we would ask that everybody please does do like the video and comment and share it, because some of the content we have goes against the agenda. Therefore, it gets shadow banned, and we want to beat the algorithm on YouTube and social media. So please like it, comment, share it, get it out on Twitter, Facebook, all of your parent WhatsApp groups, everywhere you possibly can. And if you have any stories that you want us to cover, we've covered a few from our followers, just email us at info@naturalwomenscouncil.ie, and we will add any stories that you want us to cover for the weekly wrap up. So that's great. Thanks everyone for watching tonight.